I'm Craig Timm, and this is ACAMS Live. Thank you, everyone out there, for joining. Feel free to say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I see several of you have already done that. You see me looking down. I've got my phone. I'm looking at the comments that you send in through here. So I am paying attention, but feel free. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have a question, you can also put that in the comments as well. Today, we are going to focus on Asia. We're coming off recent ACAMS assembly, an ACAMS assembly in Japan, a symposium in Singapore, and there is a lot happening in the region. And I am extremely lucky today to be joined by two experts to walk us through what's top of mind from an AFC perspective in Asia. So first, we have Hiroshi Ozaki. He is currently an executive director at KPMG in Japan. He was previously the chief financial inspector of AML and CFT at the Financial Services Agency in Japan. And prior to that, he had many years of experience working in AFC in the private sector. Next, we have Caryn Leong. Caryn's my colleague at ACAMS, serving as our regional director for APAC. And before that, she worked at a number of financial institutions, including Standard Chartered, JP Morgan, UBS, ABN AMRO, and others. So Ozaki-san and Caryn, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Well, today we're going to touch on three major AFC issues affecting the region. So fraud, the fifth round of mutual evaluations, and geopolitics. So let's start with fraud. And Ozaki-san, I want to start with you. So fraud is exploding globally. Give us a sense of what the challenge is like in Japan. So what are the types of fraud that are most prevalent? What's the scope and scale that we're talking about? And how is Japan trying to adjust this challenge?
Okay, thank you, Craig, and thank you for having me today. So it's a great opportunity. So regarding the fraud situation in Japan, as well as in other countries, fraud, cyber-enabled crime, and money laundering are serious problems in Japan. In 2023, last year, fraud losses or damage nearly doubled from the previous year to approximately 163 billion yen. That is equivalent to a 1.1 billion US dollar, indicating that Japan's trust foundation in the society is being shaken. So among the scams and fraud, investment fraud through SNS, and romance scam, and support scam, which is to ask to install the remote control software on PCs and steal private information on the PCs, are increasing. The government of Japan released the action plan twice in June 2019 and March 2023 previously, the government also cooperated with the public and private sector, such as promoting measures to prevent damages for occurring and cooperation with financial institutions and convenience stores, and they prevent the mobile phones, SNS, telephone, forwarding services, and other services from being misused in this kind of bad circumstances. That's the kind of the ecosystem to prevention and fighting with the fraud. However, these public and private sectors measures and cooperation advanced, organized crime groups change their methods and expand their damages. They are always smart and ahead of us. The Japanese government needs to update the measures promptly in response to these trends and changes and organized crime actions. In fact, in August this year, the Osaka Prefecture Police announced that they had arrested organized crimes of money launderers called Ribaton Group. It's a Ribaton Group incident or case. They are accused for managing more than 4,000 money mule accounts. Wow. And laundered, yes, at least about 70 billion, that is yen, that is US equivalent, 468 million US dollar equivalent. It's not a pocket change, it's a huge amount. And the number of the misused account, that's shocking to the financial industry. In light of these circumstances, as of August 23 this year, Japan FSA and the NPA, National Police Agency, issued unpleasant statement asking the deposit institution to enhance the detection capabilities of the misuse of or money mule accounts. The contents of these reports is diversified, but making a long story short, so enhance the detection capability in using the digital forensic for internet access, and also the enhancement of the scenario of the like a legacy transaction monitoring system and cooperation with police and information sharing. So that is the keys. It is important to note that regional financial institutions and small and medium-sized financial institutions may face challenges in implementing these measures. For instance, they need help utilizing the technologies and analyze digital footprints in internet banking, such as real-time monitoring, not only legacy transaction monitoring systems. However, with the proper support and the resources using third parties, such as the, let's say, digital solution vendors or collaboration among the financial institutions, these institutions, smaller and medium-sized institutions, can also enhance the measures of the fight against financial crime. So that's all so far what's going on in Japan. Thank you, Craig.
No, thank you. That is a lot. And I'm glad that you raised the issue of shaking trust in society, because that's often the hidden consequence of this. It's not just an AFC issue. And I think more and more governments are viewing this as a national security issue, potentially, even a threat to governments and society. So I'm really glad you raised that. Caryn, I want to turn to you now. What are you seeing? You're based in Singapore, but I know you do a lot of work across the region. You're currently in Vietnam. What are you seeing elsewhere in the region? Is it similar to what Ozaki-san described? Is it different? Let us know what you're seeing.
I think it's the same, just with different flavors. But just before I get into, some of the themes that had emerged from the Singapore Symposium, I want to pick up on what Ozaki-san had said with regards to the Riverton Group. So we thought that originally this is in Japan, it's encapsulated in Japan, but actually what in September, right, it was reported and it broke in Singapore news, right, that the top brass of the Riverton Group were actually living in Singapore, and they were also directors of a software firm here. Now, what was interesting was because what was interesting as part of that is that they set up companies here, and it went through due diligence process with the banks. So the lawyer who did that, setting up the companies, had performed due diligence checks on the Japanese men, in addition to the law firm who had given him the instructions to do so. He has asked them all the right questions, gone through the CDD processes, and in fact, he was extra careful, especially after the $3 billion money laundering case in Singapore, right? But what happened in this case was that clearly the Riverton Group knew what they were doing. They operated like a normal company. They had worked normal office hours, right? They were attending meetings. They were being paid a salary. So as we can see, right, this is really a sophisticated syndicate, right, who clearly knew what they were doing, who understood bank controls. And I just want to go back to what Ozaki-san said. This is an ecosystem problem and a challenge, not just specific to one country, but it spreads across different jurisdictions, right? And fraud is certainly something that requires an ecosystem approach, not just FIs, but also the telcos, social media platforms, government, law enforcement. It's literally the end-to-end, because if you think about it from a financial institution perspective, we're probably the last place before the money exits, and we're the last stop. And that fraud and scam life cycle, if you look at it from a life cycle perspective, right, had started way before it got into the banks. So it's still high on agendas. People are still talking about fraud, and it's still a concern in a lot of locations across Asia, not specific to Singapore, but also in Hong Kong, in Australia, right? And it's a continual conversation about it. Yeah. But just want to jump back into your question about what else we're seeing. Singapore Symposium. We, of course, had the Singapore Symposium on the 30th of September here, right? And that conversation was very much around technology, the use of technology, the adoption of technology. What is technology doing or helping financial institutions in the fight against financial crime and money laundering? there were a lot of questions around, you know, how do you adopt technology? What looks good? What are some of the risks that you're looking at? What are some of the systems that are being used? And very often in the Q&A sessions, there were a lot of questions around transaction monitoring. How do organizations manage false positives? How do they decrease turnaround times? What systems, again, are being used? Does technology in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, are they useful? Are they effective? So that's a lot of discussion that's been happening right now in Singapore. Some of the interesting things that I thought that were coming through from the speakers was, you know, around the use of technology. Do you always need to start with a use case, or do you actually provide the tools to the people who need it and see how they are going to be able to use it and how they are going to put that into effective use? So sometimes maybe starting from a use case might not be the best way, you know, and hopefully it's letting people experiment in a safe environment, see how they can use it to optimize it as part of that processes, as well as using it effectively. A lot of the conversations also talk about, you know, skills of anti-financial crime practitioners, right? Oftentimes we work in a bubble. Especially for a lot of us who work in large organizations, you've got different departments. You have to learn how to work outside of your bubble, across the silos, to break down those barriers, to share that information, because only then when you can connect the dots end to end and use the customer information and use the red flags that is showing up on all your dashboards, then you have a good and complete picture of the client, the suspicion, and also apply that into the risk assessment process. So really, really understand your risk, right? And what I took away from the Singapore Symposium was fighting financial crime is actually a team sport, right? You can't do it alone. You need a lot of people. And again, we talk about ecosystem, we talk about collaboration, we talk about whole of society, we talk about whole of country, whole economy kind of approach. So that's what I'm hearing across the board, no matter where I go.
That's great. And so you're talking about effectiveness in one context, using technology, working across silos, working across really regions and the world to better fight fraud. To now I want to turn to effectiveness in a different context and talk about the 5th round of FATF mutual evaluations. So Ozaki-san, I'll go back to you first. Japan's on-site evaluation isn't scheduled until 2028, which in some ways seems like a long time, but actually it's not, because the way these evaluations work, the review period starts much earlier. And so actually 5 years before the on-site, they can start looking at evidence and information. And so actually for most countries in the world, like the spotlight is now on whether FATF is coming right away or not. And so Ozaki-san, I'm interested in your perspective in how is Japan preparing for the mutual evaluation, and what are some of the key areas of focus as it's doing so?
Yes, that's true. So we don't have plenty time. So they are enemy at the gate. I don't say enemy at 5. So anyway, so we have to prepare, start now. But before that, so at the Tokyo Assembly, which was held in September in Tokyo, so, you know, FATF 5th round of the mutual evaluation and the methodology change was one of the main topics of the discussion. Not only the how to cope with the fraud. So that I will explain the what's going on here in Japan for the 5th round of the mutual evaluation. But before that, I'd like to comment on the what Caryn said. So the organized crime is working cross-border basis. So one interesting story is the one of the leader of the Japanese fraud group was captured in a prison in Philippines. But from the prison, he was giving an order to his groups in Japan how to do it. That's very interesting. And the name of the that leader kept in the prison in the Philippines was Luffy. It's the main character of the One Piece. It's funny, isn't it? So, but anyway, they are fighting cross-border. That's why we have to work together. So breaking the silos and the bubbles in the organization and in the country, and we have to work together among the different jurisdictions. That's the key, very important aspect, how to cope with the fraud and the financial crime. And I'm going to the FATF future 5th round of the mutual evaluation and what's going on in Japan. So yes, Japan is scheduled to be assessed at the plenary in February 2029. So that means, as the Craig says, the on-site will be maybe held on 2028, and the scoping note will start sometime in 2027. So we have just 3 years to go. So that's why and also October 10th of this year, it was last week, we have a good news. FATF released the third enhanced follow-up report of Japan after the fourth mutual evaluation. Now several recommendations was upgraded, and Japan has just LC above, no less than PC or non-compliance now. So that's a good news. So, but, however, in the fifth round of the mutual evaluation, FATF will place more emphasis on effectiveness and the application of prevention measures by FIs and the BASPs, and the supervision will be now assessed under the immediate outcome 3, and the application and prevention measures by the DNFVPs and their supervision will be evaluated under a immediate outcome IO4. So furthermore, some critical standards that the recommendation for technical compliance has changed. So particularly in the areas such as beneficial ownership, that is IO5 and recommendation 24 and recommendation 25. And also the confiscation, such as recommendation 4, 30, 31, and 38, and 40. And the proliferation financing, that's IO11 and recommendation 1 and 2. So Japan has identified weakness in these areas, and Japan needs to focus on improving before the fifth round of the mutual evaluation more. Even though just we got the LC and more in the fourth mutual evaluation, it is not, enough. We have to work harder. So time is limited, and we must work strategically and leveraging the private and the public and the partnership and working together, breaking the silos. So that's what I like to share with you, what's going on for FATF future mutual evaluation and fifth round in Japan. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that's a subtle thing that maybe people don't appreciate when they, in 3 and 4, immediate outcome 3 and 4, splitting financial institutions and DNFBBs, I think what I've heard is a lot of times the financial institutions were ahead. And so it ended up raising the overall score. But now that they've split them, if you're in a DNFBP, they're going to zoom right in on you, and you're not going to have the financial sector to raise the bar. And so I think I'm really glad you highlighted that, because that is going to be, I think, an area where a lot of countries struggle in this next round.
Yeah, that's why I'm carefully and waiting for the outcome of the mutual evaluation on Malaysia and Singapore to be assessed in the near future.
Perfect transition. You've got a little bit of time in Japan to sit back and wait. Caryn, you are not so lucky. Singapore, FATF is coming in very soon. They will be in mutual evaluation next year. So what is Singapore doing to prepare? What are the key areas of focus there?
Okay, so I feel a little bit like the guinea pig, right? Like Ozaki-san saying that he's waiting for us, so that Japan can take a leaf from our book and hopefully, get a step ahead of us. Now, of course, Singapore, being as competitive as we are, have started work on preparing for the next round of mutual evaluation. That's going to start, I think, in the middle of next year. A lot of work has been done. This year, we have issued quite a few documents as evidence of the progress of the work that we have done, right? We had the National Risk Assessment for AML, right? We've got a terrorism financing National Risk Assessment, right? And as well, the Singapore National Asset Recovery Strategy. So there were quite a lot of things that's coming out from that. In addition to that, we also had the Inter-Ministerial Committee report. This was actually put together post a $3 billion money laundering case to assess, are there any shortfalls in terms of our AML framework from a regulatory perspective, and what are we doing in terms of bolstering certain areas of weakness. Now, just to get back to the point of the fifth round of mutual evaluation, the areas of weaknesses that Ozaki-san had highlighted for Japan are quite similar to what is being expected, similar to that of Singapore, right? And just want to rewind a little bit back, right? Our Singapore last mutual evaluation was in 2016, and to be completely candid about it, the result was a bit of a shocker because every effort was made to prepare for it and prepare for it well. They've taken benchmark for it from equivalent locations to see what else we can do, what we can learn from other areas, how do we implement it, and how do we put that into effective implementation in Singapore. And when the results came out, we were a little bit taken aback because we weren't exactly where we would want to be. So between now and then, of course, a lot of work has been done. A lot of work is being done today. The areas of weaknesses from the 2019 follow-up report was still talking about weaknesses in DNFPB, CDD, regulation around the supervision on DNFPBs and sanctions. So again, similar to what Ozaki-san is saying, of course, also, with regards to global transparency, beneficial owner, do we have a registry in place, right? Now, we've actually taken an effort to put a lot of that into effect already. We have a beneficial ownership registry in Singapore. We've amended some of the laws to make sure that we are up to standard. So for us, the main areas of focus are enhanced data sharing to help expedite investigations, improve detection of money laundering and serious crimes. So we've seen Cosmic go live this year, but they've been in testing for a while already. We've also done quite a lot of work around international cooperation. So again, with transnational crime, working with other regimes, working with other regulators, working with other law enforcement to make sure that we're part of a wider network and we're able to share information quickly as well as in the right way possible. We've also simplified prosecution processes for overseas offenses. So prosecutors will need to prove only that the launderer knew or believed they're dealing with criminal proceeds rather than having to trace the funds from end to end and then evidence it, right? Oh, one of the things that, of course, have changed is that we now recognize environmental crimes. So this was previously not part of our regulations. So we're able to investigate money laundering linked to foreign environmental crimes like illegal mining, waste trafficking. So, like I said, these were previously not recognized as serious offenses under Singapore law. We have also looked at how do we improve the handling of seized assets, streamline the process for obtaining court orders to sell seized properties when they are no longer needed for investigations, reducing maintenance costs. And also, lastly, but certainly most importantly, we have the Central Beneficial Ownership Registry to obtain and maintain the beneficial ownership information to ensure that the information is accurate and also readily available to competent authorities, right? And of course, it's not just having the information, it's making sure that the information is accurate. So a lot of effort has been put into those areas.
Yeah, these mutual evaluations are already getting a huge amount of focus around the world. You can hear all of the challenges and the bar, I think it's pretty clear the bar is raised this time, right? So even if you did well last time or did okay last time, it's going to be more challenging this time. There's higher expectations. And so everybody should be aware of that. And I think you've given, some great areas of focus and ideas. I want to turn to our last topic now, geopolitics. And we've got a question in the chat from Luke that I'll sort of wrap together with another question. Caryn, I'll go to you first. Luke asks, how can Japan and Singapore develop harmonized frameworks that address both unique regional fraud risks and globally recognized AML CFT standards while remaining adaptive to changes in geopolitical pressures and cross-border activity? And so, I think one part of that harmonized approach and part of the challenge is a conflict of laws. And this can be, whether it's sanctions or otherwise, whether it's U.S. and China tensions, whether it's otherwise, it can be a challenge for an AFC professional who feels stuck in the middle. And so, Caryn, maybe you can address some of that, talk to Luke about how to deal with some of these challenges, and just talk more generally about, the geopolitical politicization almost of AFC, and that really puts, us in the middle sometimes.
Okay, so it is a complex question, and I don't think it's an easy question to answer. There's so many different perspectives. There's so many different areas that we can delve into, and each of it, right, deserves time on its own that maybe time we don't have today. Certainly in terms of, developing harmonized frameworks, every country and every regulator would have to recognize that each of them are unique, right? The money laundering risk for Singapore would not be 100% the same as that of Japan, because we've got a slightly different banking system. Geographically we're different. The type of businesses that we have onshore, right, and offshore would be also very different. But what is important is to recognize your international standards, right? That's, for example, like your FATF recommendations, right? And making sure that we are all in this together. And we need to take into consideration what looks good, as well as perhaps what might look good in my country potentially could be more stringent and thus more difficult for organizations to do business in my location. But that is needed because this is my country, these are the risks, right? And this is how we have to be able to approach the problem. So I think that, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It's always going to be different, but what is important is to understand the risks in different locations and understand how we can actually do business in the different locations in the right way, in the most optimal way for every organization, regardless whether you're working in a bank or you're working in a corporate, right? And make sure you are compliant to these regulations. Now, remaining adaptive to changing geopolitical pressures in cross-border activity, that's really, really very hard. And it also depends on the organization that you work for. So for example, if I work for a domestic organization, then I don't have to think too much about it, right? Because I don't have cross-border trades and I don't have cross-border functions. Now, if I'm a regional or international organizations, then I need to make sure I understand what is happening and what do I have to comply to, because it is going to be very complex. We talk about Asia being a crossroad, a trading crossroads. Naturally, we would be caught up in the crosshairs of geopolitics. It's unavoidable, right? And we've seen sanctions, export controls, right? And actually a long list of never-ending requirements that continues to be evolving, that continue to be complex. So organizations need to understand, what do I need to adhere to? What is my business and what's going to impact me, right? And they have to work out in terms of maybe putting together a registry. What might be potentially conflicting? And if it conflicts, what does that mean? What is my fallback plan? What is my playbook around it? And what do I have to do in order to meet my requirements as well as to do business in the right way? So these are some of the ways that organizations are doing it. And of course, I think organizations need to dig a lot deeper, right? Go beyond the first layer, right? Take screening, for example. You can't just rely on a simple screening solution, right? You need to understand who are the owners. You need to understand where they are. You need to understand what is the percentage of ownership when you do a business with a corporate, because on the surface, it might seem bona fide, but when you dig deeper, because of the multiple layers of ownership and the fact that some of it's a bit opaque, you might be surprised as to what you potentially might dig out. So don't take things on face value. Make sure we understand our businesses, our partners, our clients, our geography, as well as the products that we offer to our clients. And what does it mean, right, in terms of geopolitics? Can I continue to do a business? What do I have to do to make sure that I have a backup plan in case the worst case scenario happens? And I hope I kind of answered that in a very long about way.
No, that's great. That's great. And just on that ownership issue, our colleague George Voloshin just put together a toolkit on ownership and control and how to dig beyond those initial levels, how to really understand. So after we're done here, I'll make sure I'll go find a link and I'll put it in the chat so that people can check that out, because that is a big challenge. Well, we're about to wrap up, but Ozaki-san, I want to go to you, because this issue sometimes is esoteric. It seems distant, but for you in Japan, it's very real. You have a neighbor in North Korea that will sometimes, from time to time, shoot rockets in your direction.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't get more real than that. How do you think about these geopolitical challenges in Japan?
So yeah, we have a rough neighbor here, actually. Yes, and so North Korea is sanctioned by the UN Security, Security Council resolution. And so that's why the Japanese law and regulation prohibit generally no transaction, financial transaction with that country. And October, it was October, it was 5th, I don't remember, it was March. Yes, it was March this year. The part of Japanese government released the Proliferation Financing Risk Assessment Report. So based on that report, government of Japan is strengthening the coordination among the relevant ministries in the government and agencies and improving the proliferation financing measures. So that's number one. And also facing the big threats like ransomware attacks. So targeting Japanese company continue to increase. So some ransomware attacks are linked to the Lazarus groups, which closely ties with North Korea. In recent cases, it was also discovered that the North Korean IT engineers was involved in the subcontractors of a Japanese animation company. So, yeah, that's the threat and the danger is clear and real. Yes, that's why we have to work together. So not only this kind of geopolitical risk, but also the activities of organized crime, as we have discussed at the first agenda. And I totally agree with the Caryn says to a question by the Luca. So yeah, so why the organized crime is working cross-border basis, across the jurisdictions? Why don't we do the same? So maybe FSA and MAS, supervisors and regulators for financial institutions in Singapore and Japan working together closely. So every time I visit the MAS as well. So, and the police agencies have the strong ties in Egmont groups and bilateral basis. But I'd like to emphasize that the private sector's collaboration is a key. We have to break through the silos, and we have to together discuss. And the Japanese 3 megabanks has the big operation in Singapore, and they are the regional head offices. So we can, it's a kind of the economy and the financial system in the same ecosystems. So we can fight together. So, and ACAMS is a very good platform for among the private sectors, the specialist expertise, and from the financial institutions, and sometimes non-financial institutions from many jurisdictions. So I think that's a very, very good platform to discuss and discuss a collaboration and work together. So that's I'd like to emphasize on today. So I do not want to make a longer speech because time is running up.
Well, I think that my key takeaway from actually from all of these issues is collaboration, right? To address fraud, to address the geopolitical challenges, to even prepare for the mutual evaluation, breaking down silos within your institution, within your country, across your region. That's what I heard from both of you today. That's really the key to doing, to meeting all these challenges. So unfortunately, we could talk all day about this. There's a lot of stuff we could get into. But Caryn and Ozaki-san, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, who said hello in the chat. We really appreciate it. And we will see you all next time on ACAMS Live.
Yeah, we need 3 more hours to discuss more.
We'll sign you up, Ozaki-san.
Okay, yes. Okay,
absolutely.
It's Friday, so let's go to dinner. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Bye, Craig and Caryn. And thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Ozaki-san.